Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Shawn. On this episode, we will have some Bears ranting, some Blackhawks talk, and what is going on with Jimmy Buckets. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does this mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. They had a little bit of a rough weekend, but fans need to come out there and support. So head on over to icehogs.com, get yourself some tickets, jersey, shirt, hat, etc. and tell them Swerski Sports sent you. So Alex, my friend, how are you this Arctic, cold Illinois winter day?
Well, staying warm as best as I can. Kind of sad that the holidays are over and done with. We had to take down all the decorations, but, new year, lots of stuff coming up. So, going in with head held up high, I guess.
I mean, this is the first time in any of our lifetimes, or mine and your lifetimes combined, that we went into a new year going, we are the Chicago Cubs World Series champions. So it can't be that bad.
Feels great.
Does feel great.
Feels great.
And I, unfortunately, had to take down holiday decorations much sooner than usual because our Christmas tree, I don't know what, we go to the same place every year. It's these people that come into Chicago from Michigan, and they set up an empty lot, live in a trailer, and sell trees. And we go there every year for the tree. And this year, maybe a week before Christmas, there was a lot of needles were falling off the tree. All right, this is weird. We keeping it watered? Yeah, it's watered. And then it was getting worse and worse. And by Christmas morning, if you would walk too hard past the tree, you would just hear and thousands of needles falling off.
Oh, jeez.
And the Christmas morning, there was almost no needles left on this tree. So I was all right, well, we
Charlie
gotta take
Brown.
this down. It really was. It was so sad. But the nice thing is in Chicago, the garbage people don't take your tree. You have to take it to a recycling place, and which is at city parks. And taking the tree to the city park was much easier this year because I didn't have to worry about any needles or anything like scraping the car or being in the car. It was just an empty, barren bunch of branches on on the body of a tree. Not fun.
Yeah, that sounds kind of sad. Now, where did you get that tree from? Because our family, we used to get real trees from an empty lot around here, but we don't anymore. We use the fake stuff now. Where is that trailer area that you get it from?
It is up. If you're familiar with the Chicago Blue Line, it is at right across the street from the Harlem Blue Line stop. So Harlem and it's right at the exit of 90 from Harlem from I-90.
Okay, I see.
And,
yeah, suburban area with us, so yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to convince my wife to go to the fake tree because I grew up with a fake tree, and it's the same every year. You get the same tree, the same everything, and it's nice consistency. And my wife's like, no, it's not Christmas if you don't have a real tree.
Doesn't have the smell. That's the one downside.
I'm sure I can buy a Lysol spray or
They have those candles that are pretty good.
Yeah, I can handle that. Oh well. So you had a few things that you wanted to say about the Chicago Bears, and you have my interest piqued. So
yeah, I'll be asking you questions throughout this rant. So be ready.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I watched I actually listened to the press conference at work, and so I have a few thoughts of my own. So please, my friend, jump on in.
All right, here we go. We finished the season. It's another losing season. The Bears aren't close to the playoffs. We've had one playoff appearance since the Super Bowl appearance, which was a decade ago. We've had 3 playoff appearances since 1999-2000. We've had some decent seasons, but we haven't gotten the championship, and we've spent a lot more time with the Bears looking at not so good seasons compared to good seasons. Now, I was feeling kind of numb about all this for a while. I'm kind of used to it. But then today, as I am sitting down and watching Aaron Rodgers throw yet another Hail Mary, and looking at that Packers team that ran the table and won the division, a team that can do that year in and year out and make the playoffs year in and year out. The fact that they have made the playoffs more times the past few years than the Bears have made since the early 90s. As a Bears fan, I'm so sick of it. And watching the Packers do that, it just, something switched in my mind today, and I just went off. I was screaming to myself, I am so sick of this. I am so sick of being a joke year after year and watching the Packers do what they do year after year. Now, I know they haven't won the Super Bowl in the past few years, but they've won more Super Bowls than we have. They're in the playoffs every year. They have a recent one in 2010 after beating us, which makes it even worse. You had them beating us for the division in Week 17 of 2013. You have, Aaron Rodgers doing all these great things for the Packers year in and year out. And, the hype for the Packers just builds up always, 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 every football season. And here are the Bears, year after year, in the dust. What about next year? What's going to happen in the future? And the answer is usually, honestly, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who we're going to draft. I don't know if they're going to work out. I don't know if they're going to stay healthy. Is George McCaskey and ownership going to make any drastic changes? You hope. But you know what? Oftentimes, it's the same old garbage every year. And you know what? You look at Green Bay. They are far and away better an organization than the Bears are right now. They've been a better organization for the past 20 years. I mean, it wasn't always like that. For the past 20 years, though, that's 2 decades. And it just, doesn't this make ownership, doesn't it drive them nuts to see this rival continuing to feed this greatness to themselves and us being non-playoff contenders, either mediocre or bad all these years? It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I share your sentiment, and after the Bears press conferences, George McCaskey was talking about how Virginia is very upset. She doesn't like to lose, and she's very upset after every loss. And it's, part of me is just aren't you used to it by now? You've put together a loser for so long. Even when you win,
right.
It's, it just doesn't, it feels like a lot of luck rather than skill. I mean, realistically, when the Bears went to the Super Bowl against the Colts, did you think that was a Super Bowl caliber team, or were you like, man, we got lucky a lot of times?
Well, I mean, you look at the way that team was built, and I mean, most of that was all from just how good that defense was. I mean, that defense brought us so far.
And so it's a little bit of that is, this team is missing one key thing from ever being a potential year in and year out contender. That's a quarterback. We haven't had one. We have not had one in a long time. I actually just wrote an article and posted it on Friday, I think, on the website, swerskisports.com. And I went through all of the starting quarterbacks the Chicago Bears have had since Jim McMahon left the team. And In 23 seasons, it's been 26 starting quarterbacks. 26 different quarterbacks have started a game for the Chicago Bears, and that's including Jay Cutler started the bulk of games for the last several years. So there's no consistency with Green Bay. Is when was the last time they had a regular starter that wasn't named Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers? They have a Hall of Fame quarterback. They've had one for 20 straight years now.
Yeah, since early 90s.
So they've had for like 20 some years, they've had a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. It makes everybody else around them better. Their wide receivers. I mean, is Jordy Nelson bad? No, of course not. But is he great? Is he a great quarterback or a wide receiver? No, he's not. There are no great wide receivers on that team. But they're made better by the quarterback. They have converted a wide receiver to be running back. So what they have is a really good offensive line, and they've got a Hall of Fame quarterback, and it makes everybody around them better. And when you are an offense that can put up 38 points on one of the best defenses in football, and it makes your defense that much better. They're able to make, like with the Bears, if they make a mistake trying to make a big play, then it's suddenly the offense is in a hole, and they can't score enough points to get out of that hole.
Right.
And plus, the Packers' offense, they go down and they put enough points on the board, they take up enough time, and they stay on the field for more than 3 and outs. It keeps the defense fresh. So you're able to have a 102-year-old Julius Pepper still out there rushing the quarterback because he's not out there for 38 minutes out of a 60-minute game. It's
right.
So you solve the most difficult position in the sport to solve. If you solve that, everything else falls into place. The Colts are a frustrating franchise because they do have a fantastic quarterback and they can't seem to make everything fall into place. But typically when you have an elite quarterback, everything else falls into place. You may have an off year every once in a while, but for the most part, it makes everybody around you better, including on the defense. And the Bears just don't have that. They don't have that consistency.
Right. No, you're absolutely right on everything. I mean, look at the team that went to the Super Bowl in 2006. I mean, you saw what Rex Grossman did in the Super Bowl, and a lot of it pretty much cost us the Super Bowl. The defense, held up for a lot of it, but, essentially we lost that Super Bowl. I don't like playing shoulda, woulda, coulda, but I think if that team had a better quarterback, they probably have a much better chance of winning that Super Bowl. Now, another thing I kind of want to go off in right now, and you could probably answer this question better than I can, you being older than I am, but the Bears, for many years, for a long time, when it came to sports and a lot of marketing and a lot of stuff involved with the city of Chicago and Illinois, they ran the city of Chicago. Bear Sunday was like just part of everyone's lives. It was, I gotta move my schedule around because the Bears game is at noon or it's at 3. It was just part of everyone's lives. And even when they were bad in the early 2000s, the Bears were still very relevant and people still took their time to watch them. This year, like I said, I know I'm younger than you are, and you could answer this better, but I can't remember when the Bears were so irrelevant in the city. I mean, I've never seen so many people take away their interest from the Bears and just not care, because there was no point of caring with the way things were going. But I just, look at the games, the past few home games at Soldier Field, it was empty. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, the stadium being empty for home games is a huge indictment. I mean, I remember games where it was, 5 degrees, 6 degrees, 10 degrees, cold, rainy, whatever the temperature, and people are out there tailgating. People are out there ready to go. Now people are like, well, why would I do that? Why? I mean, my sister got free tickets to the super cold Bears game. Was it the second to last one?
Against the Packers.
Yeah, and everybody, including myself, were like, why would you even take them? That doesn't make any sense. And it's you're absolutely right. Is when I was a kid, is in the schoolyard Monday mornings, we would all come into school and talk about what Walter Payton did, or what Jim Harbaugh did, or just about the Bears game. Even though we just didn't really know what was going on, we just knew players and saw a few plays, but we talked about it. I remember going to through college, and people, most of the time college students lose track of sports for the most part, except for like highlights, just because you're in college, but Bears people would pay attention. When I got a full-time job, people talked about the Bears. And I lived for about 9 years in Philadelphia after college, until about 2008. And while I was there, that was a lot of time when the transition happened, when people stopped really caring. But it was weird because I was in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, their fans are just, even though they're the worst fans in sports, as far as their attitudes, they are so passionate, and
they are.
On Sundays, there's, if you go to church, you'll hear a EAGLES Eagles chant break out in a church.
Sure.
And everybody drops what they're doing, and they're like, well, the Birds are playing at noon, or East Coast, 1:00. So it was everybody dropped what they did. Even people that were just casual fans at least made that block of time where they could at least see part of the game. I work for one of the biggest companies in the world right now, and when I go into work, there is not a single person I work with that I could talk to the games about, because nobody watches it. Nobody. And it's not even oh, I just sort of watched a few minutes of it, or I don't, one of those people that I watched it, but I'm not a big enough fan to have conversations about it. No, just nobody watched. People be at best, they're like, oh, I heard they lost on the radio this morning when I was driving in.
Yeah, and it's oh, they lost, big surprise. Isn't that what they do? They're the Bears. And you have people that aren't really that into sports, where years ago when the Bears were good, even they'd be like, yeah, I heard about the Bears game. I heard it was really intense. Now people who do care about sports are like, oh, that happened in the Bears game? Yeah, I didn't see it. I didn't bother watching. Now, I still watch the games, and even though I always kind of say to myself, I really don't want to watch the games, it's almost like a drug. I end up watching the games. I've seen most Bears games. The ones I've missed is because I've been out or had a job or, something. I've had to do something. But for the most part, I've seen most of the games. I missed a couple of the ones earlier on, but for a team that used to run this town, I know there are some outside factors. The biggest factor outside, let's face it, the Cubs did kind of take away a little bit from the Bears early on. But, I mean, come on, the whole world was watching the Chicago Cubs. But even afterwards, it'd be like, okay, baseball season's over in Chicago. It's football season. It's just, you just get the moans and groans, and no one would really be invested in it. You know what I mean? There wasn't that same desire to look forward to the next game. Everyone used to look at the matchups. Everyone says, okay, let's place our bets. I mean, my old priest, God rest his soul, he would always make Bears predictions every time a service would be wrapping up. And if the game was at noon, he'd try to kind of wrap things up so we could see as much of the game as possible. I just don't see that anymore anywhere. No one really makes time to watch or be involved with the Bears, because it just doesn't matter to people as much now because of how bad things have been.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Chargers fan, or a Los Angeles Rams fan, or whatever, it makes sense that, oh, I could be outside because it's 80 degrees during the football game. I'm going to be outside doing outdoor activities. We live in Chicago. There's not much to do because it's Arctic. It's cold. Like you're
Right.
you should be able to make time a couple of hours on a Sunday to watch the game, and it's sad. But the thing is, and if you think about it, is since the Bears last won a championship, is the Cubs broke a 100-plus-year-old curse. The White Sox have won. The Blackhawks have won 3, and the Bulls have won
The modern
6.
dynasty.
Yeah, and so this town has had 2 dynasties and possibly into a 3rd dynasty in different sports since the last time the Bears won a world championship. And you weren't even alive when that happened.
Nope, I was
Were
not.
you were not alive, and you were an adult man, and you were not alive.
Yep, my brother who's older than me wasn't alive either.
Yeah, I mean, I remember everything about that game. I remember, like, right afterwards is my mom and I went to Kmart, and the manager of the store was just so excited. I had a Bears jacket on, and he loved the Bears, and he handed me a 2.5-inch Bears button and a pennant just for free. And it's
that's
like, here you
awesome.
go. And I was like, it was just everybody was so excited. And I remember seeing the clips of the parade, the ticker tape parade on the news that night. And, it was just, or the night of the parade. It was so cool. And like now let's talk proactively here. Is this team, they didn't finish well, but I'm gonna put a positive spin on this, and I think of a 3-13 team that's getting the 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft, that they have about as up of an arrow as possible for being 3-13 this year.
Oh, sure. I definitely agree with that. And, we know now, they say they're rebuilding. We know they're rebuilding. We know it takes time. And, I think most Bears fans get that. But it doesn't make it any less frustrating, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, if you think about the Cubs when they completely rebuilt from scratch, how long it took, and it's another sport, but how much luck went involved. There was a lot of skill and a lot of luck, and you talk with Jed or Theo, and they will absolutely say a lot of luck went into things.
Well, think about the Astros getting Appel before the Cubs got Bryant. That was, that was kind of big.
Yeah, so it was, a lot of luck went into it. And with the Bears, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, there's going to have to be a roadmap, and some lucky breaks are going to have to fall their way. And most of that luck is going to come in the way of how are they going to solve the quarterback situation. I'm a huge fan of if you know you're rebuilding, don't force the quarterback hand. Is one of the biggest mistakes you can make with running an NFL franchise and rebuilding is reaching for a quarterback too early. I mean, if you reach too early in the 3rd round and you move up, or whatever, who cares? But if you are reaching for a 1st-round quarterback, that can set your team back for a long time. Time. I mean, think about how long the Raiders were set back by Jamarcus Russell. Think about the Chargers, how long they were set back with Ryan Leaf. I mean, think about, the Redskins were actually a pretty lucky story, is that they drafted another quarterback the same year as they drafted RG3 that turned out to be their starter. That prevented them from going all out. And
ended up being smart on their part.
Absolutely, and people were chastising them, and making fun of them, and this is the Redskins. It turned out to be a smart decision, and I think the Bears, what they're going to need to do is actually attack this the way when the Seahawks, they got, oh my God, I'm having a little moment. Who's their quarterback? Russell Wilson. Yeah. When they got Russell Wilson is they went out and they paid big money for a free agent quarterback, and they brought in a quarterback with starting experience, retread from the Vikings, Tavares Jackson, and then they drafted a quarterback as well because they had a situation on their hands, and they attacked it from multiple fronts, and one came through. And that's all you need, one to come through.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and that's what the Bears need to do is, unfortunately, the free agent market is pretty barren. There's Kirk Cousins, who I would be absolutely dumbfounded if he hits the actual market and they don't franchise him or lock him up to a long-term contract. The next best quarterback in the free agency class is probably Brian Hoyer, who right now the Bears have one quarterback under contract. One. His name is Jay Cutler. David Fales had a 2-year deal. It ended at the end of this season. Connor Shaw, who broke his leg in preseason, he was on a 1-year deal. Hoyer was on a 1-year deal. Barkley was on a 1-year deal. You're left with Jay Cutler. The good news on that is you're not locked into anybody. You can start fresh. The bad news is you're going to have to compete in the marketplace. So, I mean, if they want to bring in 2 low-cost starting quarterbacks and then bring in draft a rookie, that's fine with me. You hear a lot about a possible trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, and I'm fine with that, with the caveat of they can't overpay. They can't.
Right.
The rumor is that the starting point is going to be a first and a fourth, and there's no way. Number one is you don't give up this first round pick for
especially
anything.
when you're rebuilding like the Bears are.
Yeah, you are not. This first round pick is going to have to be a Khalil Mack, Von Miller type impact player. This has got to be somebody who everybody and their mother goes out and buys a jersey of, and when you win the Super Bowl is going to be a huge reason for it. This
Right.
has to be a player. You can't trade this pick away.
Right, exactly.
2 is there's not much precedence for getting that much for a backup quarterback. I mean, realistically, they're either just throwing things out there, praying they get that, because it coincidentally enough is the same draft picks they lost for Deflategate, or they don't want to trade him because they look at him as the actual heir apparent to Tom Brady, or that they're hoping somebody's dumb enough to just give that. But honestly, if they're serious about trading him, maybe somebody's desperate enough to give a first round pick for him. But I would say that a second and a third is probably a fair price to pay for him. But he's only thrown like 60 passes in his NFL career, and he's only
That's the other thing. Right. He started just a few games before Tom Brady came back. It's not like he played an entire season.
And they needed him for 4 games this year. They needed him to play 4 games, and he didn't. He got hurt. So there's that. The other thing is he's only got 1 year left on his rookie contract. So you make this trade, you get him for this year guaranteed, and then he's going to want a big raise. So if even let's say he goes out there and performs halfway decent for you, he's going to want a Brock Osweiler type contract. And somebody out there will give it to him because they gave it to Brock Osweiler.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about this whole situation and you look at the guys who are available and it's thin, when you think about the whole situation that the Bears have now and the situation that other teams have been in who have built up to become successful, their key guys were drafted. I mean, free agent signings, you don't see them like you see them in baseball. You see in baseball where, this day and age, you have a lot more of the draft young bring up because that's just kind of the style and the direction of baseball that it has gone into. But there's always that that big free agent signing, whether it's a pitcher, an outfielder, or someone. But with football, it's so much more dependent on how you draft. And look at the past few years, look at the winners, look at the contenders, and most of these teams have their key players, whether it's their quarterbacks or top playmaker on defense, they were all drafted. So I think that's what makes football kind of unique in that sense, is that the draft is so important. You have to draft smartly or it will affect you long term. In baseball, draft picks don't work out. They don't always work out. And you know what? You can survive. If you get a decent number of good draft picks, and if you don't work out but others do, you can still be fine. In football, you really got to draft correctly in hopes to, get out of a situation like the Bears are in right now. And right now, the Bears got to make everything they got to do in the future work. It's going to be challenging. I think Ryan Pace has the mind to do it. If he can just be the man, no one else, he is the man. He's the one to build. He's the one to draft. He's the one to make the decisions. I have confidence in him. Where I get a little nervous is the intervention of other minds in the organization. But we'll see where it goes. We'll see how it evolves with Ryan Pace and how he approaches it and how everyone else approaches it. So there's a lot riding here.
Oh, absolutely. And if everything that Ryan Pace says, I'm with him 100%, is I'm a huge believer in the NFL draft, in drafting the best player available. Because even if unless you have a in their prime superstar, best Hall of Fame type player at that position, then you just draft your second best player available. But I mean, the point is that you don't draft for need. You draft the best player available, and things sort themselves out. You know what? If you have a shutdown, lockdown cornerback, and the best player available by far in your board is another cornerback, you know what? You can't have too many good cornerbacks.
Right, especially with the way injuries are in the NFL these days.
The way injuries are, the way people are running 3-4 wide receiver sets with receiving tight ends. You can't have it. So it's trust your draft board. Is you spend months and months and years putting this board together, scouting players. Trust it. Don't, like I said, is part of it is don't go all half-cocked and be like, oh my God, there's a quarterback available and we need a quarterback. Let's move all in and trade the next 2 years worth of drafts to move up to get this quarterback.
For one guy, right.
Yeah. So it's trust your draft board, trust who you are, and with the number 3 pick is you got to hope that the Cleveland Browns pull a Cleveland Browns and draft a boneheaded draft pick, and that the 49ers, that leaves you, because there's a couple of amazing defensive players, but there's 2 just absolute studs, and hopefully the Browns and the 49ers just have a meltdown and go, we need a quarterback, and go all in on a quarterback, and leaves that for the Bears. But either way, there's some really good players, and I don't rate a quarterback anywhere near that position. I hope they don't either. But the nice thing is having a 3rd pick in the 2nd round is almost like having a 1st round pick, like a late 1st rounder. Is use that as currency. After you pick that number 3 pick, if you see, oh, you know what, Matt Trubisky from North Carolina fell, he's rated around 15 to 20, so if he ends up falling because teams in that area probably have when they're playing that well, have a quarterback set, they're not going to spend a 1st rounder on a quarterback because they have one, is sneak in, move up back into the 1st round, and then you take them that way. And that's what smart teams do, and that's what the Bears need to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny how you brought up with the quarterbacks and the 4-3 and the 3-4 and whatnot. And when you think about it, the game of football, the strategy, the coaching, is changing always. And it's, the approach can be so different today than it was maybe 10 years ago. Like, think about how, like, 10 years ago, with the Bears' good defense, it was all in with the 4-3 cover Tampa 2. Now these days, everyone's on board the 4-3. And schemes are changing, coaches change, their ideals change. It's good to have as much depth as you can because A, injuries, and B, depth change is good because when you're changing your strategy, you need certain players in certain places, and you want as many, good guys in that situation as you can. So, that's one thing that the Bears need to build more of because they do have some good pieces for the future if they can stay healthy. But the thing that the Bears have lacked the past few years is any sort of depth. I mean, all across the board. That's why drafting is not only essential for the stars of tomorrow, but for the depth that you need in the future. It's so important to have that. And it's not just something you could go out and, like, shop for willy-nilly. Sometimes you could land some undrafted free agents that could make an impact, but you really want to have as much proven depth as you can because, again, with the NFL, with the way injuries are, with the way schemes change, you're going to need it.
John Fox alluded to that a little bit, and he was trying to put a positive spin on what happened this season, and the way he said it was where this year a lot of young guys had to step in and play, and the experience they gained that they in otherwise a normal season when you have a normal amount of injuries as opposed to being like the leader in injuries, is those guys wouldn't have got playing time. And actual playing time in a real game, in real situations, is so much more important than practices and mini camps and such. And he was basically saying that those guys are going to have such great experience going into next year when they're the backups. So you're going to build the depth by guys getting playing experience this year. So, I mean, there's two ways to think about building depth. It's you either build from the bottom up or you bring in top talent and push guys down. And I think the Bears need to do a little bit of both. And what they were doing, not this past season, but the first season under John Fox and Ryan Pace, is they were trying to bring in some free agents who were either entering their prime or had, were just about to enter their prime or had just kind of gone into their prime. So they weren't overpaying. They weren't paying for past production. They were paying for hopeful future production and guys in their prime as well. And then they would bring in on 1 year prove it deals to maybe some older guys. That's how they ended up with Tracy Porter. And then all the guys at the bottom of the roster is they were just churning those guys. So, who cares if you're third string tackle, if you go, you know what, we don't like what we're seeing, adios, and you bring in another guy, is you keep cycling those bottom guys through until you find people you're happy with, and you keep trying to add more top talent to push that you always want somebody better than your current starter at every position. And if you can do that, then suddenly guys that were starting for you are backups, and that makes your depth better because that's a starting caliber guy for you, in a previous year. So I have a pretty positive outlook on going forward, but it's going to, when they call that number 3 pick in the draft, it's really going to say to me where the Bears organization is headed. Because if they hit a slam dunk with that draft pick, I'm very confident that this team can turn around fairly quickly. And you mentioned that you were sad about seeing the Green Bay Packers, constantly going to the playoffs and constantly doing, being so successful. I look at it too as, hey, at least we hurt the Lions quarterback and caused them to lose in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, small victories. I don't know. It's incredible to see how Green Bay when they are looking down, they always just pick themselves back up in a season. I mean, they were 4-6 this season, and people thought that it was over for them. And here they are going on to the division round after winning every game since. And their ability to do that, a lot of it is involved with the talent of Aaron Rodgers, and a lot of it's just that organization has so many good people running in it. It really does make a difference. And you hear the way they run things, it's you don't hear anything bad. Yet here in Chicago with the Bears, fans are always questioning themselves, why are they doing this? Why are the McCaskies approaching it this way? Why are we managing this situation like this? Just as a broad example, because I feel like that question gets asked for the Bears on a weekly basis. I mean, look at when Jarrell Freeman and Alshon Jeffrey were suspended for PEDs. You're like, what are they doing? Like, who is disciplining this team? Who has control of this team? It's hard to come up with answers like that, where teams like Green Bay, they're well structured, they have everything together, and that's why when they get down, they could come right back up. And the Bears have not had that in a long time. And it's frustrating, and we know George McCaskey said it over and over, until Jesus Christ comes back, they're not selling the Bears. And it disappoints me because I really wish they would sell, and they're not going to. But you have to make the best of it. You got to realize, well, at this point, you just got to trust the personnel that they have and Ryan Pace to rebuild this thing, even if you don't feel 100% great. Because you look at the other two recently good teams in the city, the Blackhawks and the Cubs, a common theme with their rejuvenation is changing in ownership. Rocky Wirtz took over for the late Bill Wirtz, and the Tribune sold the Cubs to Ricketts. And you're kind of hoping, oh man, if the Bears can get bought by a new team, could that happen as well? Could things turn around like that? It doesn't look like that's going to happen. So, it's such an organizational thing as well. Like there's so much just not right that hasn't been right with the Bears, and it's when you're talking about the Bears in this sense, it's really hard to know where to start.
There's a culture involved with it. Think about the Steelers. That's a family-owned team as well, and they've established this culture, and they've established continuity and steadiness, and it goes through with the whole organization. They have an organizational philosophy, and it doesn't necessarily like, oh, well, this is the type of system we want to run, this is the kind of guys we want to draft. They have an overall philosophy of how they want an organization to run. They find guys that fit that mold, and they give them all of the support that they need to be able to do that, and that's why they've been such a steady and good franchise. The same thing with the Giants. There's always more upheaval less upheaval with the Giants than it comes out to be, because the New York media is so ravenous about that kind of stuff that they make mountains out of molehills to have stories. But that's an organization that's, for the most part, is very even keeled. They don't make coaching changes lightly. They don't make a lot of decisions lightly, and they do the right things. Even coming down to, just that they make smart draft picks, don't make a lot of huge splashes. The Patriots they have an organizational philosophy. They found the right guys to implement that philosophy, and then it trickles down. The Bears don't really have one. They had one under Papa Bear Hallis, but he passed it on to his kids, and they just didn't have that organizational spirit. That wasn't passed down with them. I don't doubt that they love this team and that their heart is in it, but wishing and wanting are different than having a plan and following through.
Yup, exactly. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a different trail. I just want to bring this up just really briefly. This is something I've wanted to talk to you about a little bit. We talked about the attendance, and we talked about the lack of interest. Now, I drove by Soldier Field yesterday. I was downtown. I just gonna ask you right off the bat, what is your opinion on that stadium as a Bears fan? What do you think of it? Thank you. I look at that place and I'm like, an NFL team plays here. No, not just an NFL team. One of the original NFL teams with one of the biggest markets and fan bases in all of sports. We play that at that dinky little spaceship-looking place? We could do so much. We don't even own that place. We could do so much better. I know this isn't talking about the team itself, but I've been wanting to talk about that and get your opinion on that for a little while now. That's another thing I look at Green Bay. I've been to Lambeau Field. That place is amazing. That place is incredible. Soldier Field is a piece of garbage.
Yeah, I've been to Lambeau. I've been to the Link where the Eagles play, and these are great facilities. It's Soldier Field needed to be upgraded. That happens, but I know that they had constraints from the city. I understand that, and the city is very rigid about what they were willing to do.
Yes, they are.
But there's so much more they could have done. First of all, they didn't increase the capacity. Like, even if we were
tiny,
even if we had a dome to make this an indoor stadium, the capacity is not enough for them to be rewarded with a Super Bowl. And this is part of going back to when this is the sole source of income for the McCaskey family. They don't have other money coming in. This is what their money. So they can't go out and build a $750 million stadium like Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones has it. The Cowboys are his hobby. Like, he has, the Mavericks are Mark Cuban's hobby. It's not what he does to make his income. So it's like a Kraft that owns the Patriots. That's not his sole source of income. Like, these guys,
the Ricketts have Ameritrade.
Yeah, so these people have all kinds of money, and they put the money into their passion. The Bears just don't have that kind of disposable income, so they have to work within these constraints. The Bears could have said, all right, Chicago, then fine, we'll just go. I mean, they talked about moving to like Northwest Indiana somewhere, but do you remember when the Cubs were arguing with the city about what they could do with Wrigley Field?
Oh yeah.
Rosemont offered to give the Cubs 25 acres of free land and build around it. You don't think in a heartbeat they would do that for the Bears?
Oh, they definitely would. I mean, think about that. Like, the Chicago Cubs are huge, but to get an NFL team in there, imagine that.
And Rosemont would be able to put in a huge parking lot. You would have the ability to take the train there, the L there, any of the expressways. There's the brand new mall that Rosemont has, and the brand new movie theater they have, and all the restaurants.
Good area.
Yeah,
it's not run down or bad.
Or also think about if you're flying in for the game, it's so close to O'Hare.
Yep.
So if you were the McCaskey family and you had this disposable income, you could say, well, screw it. We don't need to remodel a stadium. We could put a brand new stadium here and be able to do whatever we want and make a big enough stadium that we could get a Super Bowl, which brings in more revenue and more notoriety. They didn't. They decided to put a spaceship on top of a cool looking building.
Right. And that kind of goes back to me and the McCaskies just kind of talking about the frustration that it feels like just everything is so limited with them. I get the restraints. It all makes sense. I just wish it could be better. I mean, I go into the concourse of Soldier Field. It's just a plain concrete cinder block dungeon. There's you go into Lambeau Field and you actually feel like you're at their stadium. At Soldier Field, you're just like, is this like a warehouse? No, it's a spaceship. No, it's a stadium. It's just, there's so little to it. And, you know, the old Soldier Field, you know, obviously, that place, it's truly long gone, other than the pillars and whatnot. But at least, you know, there was, you could kind of say there was some uniqueness to it. I just feel like with Soldier Field, it's just a weird looking, just very plain place for a big NFL franchise to play. And not to mention how awful the turf is year in, year out. That's embarrassing. I know that's the Chicago Park District, but still, I mean, it's not fun to watch that.
Yeah, and it's also sad is when the city will be like, you know, we're going to make a lot of money by having the Rolling Stones play here during the week between games, and we're just going to tear up the field. It's tough.
Right.
And the Bears are, you know, that's something like a small franchise has to deal with, like a Jacksonville. Like, oh, you know what? Crap, we kind of have to deal with this. You're the Chicago Bears. You shouldn't have to deal with this. You shouldn't have to.
Exactly.
You should be able to strong arm the city and say, listen, fine, if you're not going to pay for this, we're going to put in turf ourselves. Deal with it. And
right.
They can't. They don't have that kind of clout.
Right. Exactly. It's that whole thing of saying the Bears have all these constraints. They have to do what this, and this does. And you think of that as, you know, some new franchise or one that's in a small market. This is the Chicago Bears. I mean, you would think that in this day and age, it wouldn't be that way, but unfortunately it is. Now, of course, in the old days, Hallis and Wrigley, you know, they played in one stadium, and it was, you know, there was the stuff there, but, you know, that was a long time ago, and, you know, when you play in a baseball stadium, you're obviously going to have constraints. But in this day and age, you know, when NFL franchises are separate from other franchises and stadiums other than Oakland, obviously. But it's frustrating to have to go through all this year in and year out. And you're like, man, wouldn't it be nice if we had our own stadium that was bigger and had a retractable roof and had turf and didn't have to deal with all this BS through in and out. It's, you know, it's money, management. It's a combination of a lot of things. But yeah, you look at other franchises that have much nicer stadiums, and you know, you wish you had something like that. And I hate to be so nitpicky about the Bears, but you know, I'm a fan of them throughout, but there's so much that's frustrating that you got to let it all out. And you know, venting frustration, you know, sometimes creates new thoughts in your heads, whether it's optimistic or not. But you know, I just want them to be good again. At the end of the day, I'll play on a pile of rubble as long as they're good again.
Absolutely. Winning cures all. So let's switch gears a little bit. And do you want to talk about the last couple games of the Bulls with Jimmy Butler, or these last two Blackhawks games?
Well, you know, the Hawks are playing right now, so they're in between second and third period, so why don't we go with them?
Sure. I mean, you know, since the last show is they've played, they had a 4-3 overtime win against the Buffalo Sabres, and then a 2-1 win against Teuvo Teravainen and the Carolina Hurricanes. But it was weird. I don't know your opinions about these two games, but I guess we'll talk the Sabres one first. Is they absolutely dominated the Sabres as far as shots on goal. I mean, more than doubling Buffalo Sabres,
especially in that first period.
Yeah, and you know, you saw a good jump in the step of Jonathan Toews, which you haven't really seen that much lately, and it looked
like the old Jonathan Toews again.
Yeah, and but the Sabres, they just didn't have an answer for Jack Eichel, and the Sabres, who are one of the worst teams in hockey as far as record, and they just the Blackhawks had to do all they could to beat them in overtime.
Yeah. It's funny. If you look back at the last, number of matchups the Hawks have had with the Sabres, the Hawks have always been trailing late in the game, and they've had to score a late goal to either tie it or win it. The Sabres have always kind of played the Hawks well, even though the Hawks have gotten the wins, but they've always been competitive games. Eichel's a stud. He is really, really good. The rest of the Buffalo team is still in a transition mode. Obviously, takes years to rebuild, especially with hockey, but you saw kind of the vintage Kane and Taves in overtime. You saw Taves make the moves he usually does in a given season that you haven't seen as much this year. But, it kind of goes back to that whole thing we talked about the Hawks with, where they win tight games. Sometimes it takes Scott Darling or Corey Crawford to stand on their head for a few given sequences. But they're not dominating these games by any means. And hey, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll take the 2 points. But it definitely was kind of a struggle to beat the Sabres. But we're very lucky to have someone like Artemi Panarin, who's on fire right now, and he's really, really good. I mean, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, he and Anisimov were absolute amazing additions. And you saw the boost that the Blackhawks got from having Marian Hossa back.
It was clear how valuable he is to the team.
Oh yeah, but you saw in this game the two of the Achilles heels of this team. One is turning the puck over in their own defensive zone, and their difficulties in the PK. And it's funny because they brought up a stat in this game that since December 6th, the Blackhawks have the best PK in all of hockey. And then in this game, what did they give up? Two power play goals?
Yeah, something like that.
You just saw that breakdown start to happen again. And overall, I mean, regardless of how they are in the last couple of weeks, overall in the season, they are right at the bottom as being the worst at penalty kills. And you can't be mediocre at the power play and abysmal at the penalty kill and expect to compete for a Stanley Cup. You can be great at one and mediocre at the other, but you can't be mediocre at one and awful at the other. Like you have to have the ability to either produce goals with an extra man or the ability to just shut down the other team's power play. Buffalo is not a very good team, but they have the best power play in hockey, and that keeps them a better record than they should have because of their ability to score power play goals.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the PK PP thing, because there have been years where the Hawks have had an amazing PK, but were awful at the power play, and vice versa. Do you remember in 2010 when that Hawks PK broke a franchise record for number of shorthanded goals, both in the playoffs and in the regular season? And then I think it was 2013 when their power play unit, in 2014 as well, their power play unit was so deadly. It was like you thought they were going to score almost every time they got a power play. So, we've kind of seen it fluctuate a little bit. So, you really want to improve in one of those. And, right now, I think with the situation the Hawks are in, we've seen times where the scoring has lacked. So, you really kind of want to take advantage of those penalties. But at the same time, you really got to, kill off key penalties in big moments, because we saw at the beginning of the season how awful the PK was. So it does make a big difference.
Yeah, and we've seen some ups and downs with the Blackhawks blue liners, but during the week they sent down Gustav Forsling, who was a surprise addition to this team and somebody that was exciting to watch at the beginning of the season, and has lost a lot of the confidence of the coaching staff. And they were really gracious about what the things that they said, sending him down. But when it came down to it, is the Blackhawks right now have 8 healthy defensemen and not enough minutes to go around. and Gustav Forsling is struggling right now. If you look statistically, he is the second worst Blackhawks defenseman, just ahead of Michael Roosevelt. But you can send him down to Rockford. He has options to the AHL where other guys don't. You're exposing them to get picked up. So Gustav Forsling goes down. Spencer Abbott, after his very second NHL game ever, gets sent back down.
He only was up for one game, right, this year?
Yeah, this year, and he played one game for Toronto previously, so this was his second.
Yeah.
And I watched him play, and he wasn't bad, but I didn't think he was better than Tyler Mott. So, what's the sense of having him up there right now?
Yeah, Tyler Mott being sent down. You saw how he started off the season in the preseason. You didn't think that would happen, but, next thing you knew, he was sent down. I mean, it was nice that, Hossa was coming back, but, hopefully things can work out for Tyler Mott and he'll be back up.
Yeah, but the defenseman that I've been more and more, he was a guy who was in the doghouse, but has become more and more impressive to me is Kempney. I like what I'm seeing from him.
I do too. He's making little plays.
Yeah, I mean, there was one sequence in this game where he had a really great shot opportunity, and it just missed. It just missed being a goal. And when they came down to the other end, somebody missed an assignment, and there was a fast break, and he slid across the lane of the pass to break it up with his shoulder to prevent any kind of score. And I was like, you know what? I like his hustle. He's got decent speed on him. He's shown that he's not afraid to take a shot. He's starting to come into his own as far as shooting, and statistically, it's weird. If you look at some of his advanced metrics as far as defensemen, some of them he ranks at the bottom of the Blackhawks defensemen, and the other ones he's like the best Blackhawks defenseman. Yeah. So it's like a tale of two guys. But I really like the way he's been playing lately.
He's got some more developing to do. Just a little more time. I
mean, he's not terribly young. I think he's like 25 or 26, but as far as experience goes, he does a lot. So it's a nice upside, and a cheaper option should they need to move like Brent Seabrook.
Yeah, speaking of Brent Seabrook, he's been brutal lately.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was, even in the Sabres game, the first goal was his fault. Just a sloppy turnover in their defensive zone and easy shot. It was bad.
Yeah, and it seems like there are times when he's so slow to get to a play, and he's been having trouble keeping the puck in at the blue line, like when they're on the power play. And the puck handling skill that he once had, it just seems like he's fumbling a lot more than he usually does.
Yeah, and I don't know. It just, he's been super important for the Blackhawks since they started winning the titles in 2010.
Absolutely.
He's been a key factor. He's beloved by the actual organization itself, not just the fans, but the actual organization and the coaching staff. So
especially in the playoffs. Look what he's done in the playoffs.
Yeah, when you're a defenseman playing under Coach Quenneville and he trusts you and likes you, it goes a long way, and it takes a lot to break that. I mean, Michael Roosevelt is terrible, and they will keep bringing him back as long as he can keep lacing skates up.
I thought he was done 2 years ago, man.
And they keep bringing him back because Joe Quenneville, it's like, I trust him.
He loves him.
He's like, I trust him. I know he's going to be where he should be, except the fact that it's, he's just slow. He can't do things.
He's older, he's slow, he's had injuries, and that's another thing to talk about Seabrook. He's no spring chicken, that's for sure.
No, absolutely not. So this game was nice to get a win for the Blackhawks because they've been struggling.
They needed it.
They needed this win, but it was a double-edged sword because they needed this win, and if they lost, that could have really spiraled this team because like that's a game they had to win, and it was an opponent they should beat.
Especially with the Wild surging right behind them. You know, like, because the Wild are playing really well, and they have a good number of games in hand on them, too. And the amazing thing is, we haven't played the Wild once this season, and we're already halfway done with it.
Yeah, so, like, it was a game that they needed to win against an opponent they had to beat, and they did it in a not a very nice fashion, but they got the win. And then they come back it was a day or two later, and they play Carolina, who they haven't beat yet this season, and they overcome some rough play in that game where they're outshot almost 2-1, and with Scott Darling playing lights out, they go to win against Carolina 2-1.
Yeah, and that game was kind of interesting too because, you know, you saw, you know, you saw Carolina generate some good chances, and Carolina is not always as bad as they appear. They have some nice pieces. I mean, you know, Teravainen seems to be finding a nice home there, and it's good for him. That way he'll get more consistent playing time. But you saw also Cam Ward also play like the old Cam Ward. He made a lot of good saves in that game.
Yeah, it was you know, watching that game, it was weird because I felt like a lot of it the Blackhawks did dominate, and just they couldn't put
they couldn't put him away.
Yeah, it was tough. But you saw Jonathan Taves come in with a goal, and that was fantastic, and Scott Darling just playing absolute lights out.
Oh, there were some sequences where they got four second-hand chances at a puck, and he stopped every one. The one goal that Carolina did score was because, you know, they were out of position, the Hawks were out of position, and there was no way Scott Darling, who had made an initial save, could get back to that puck and stop it again. But, I mean, he really kind of deserved to get a shutout in that game, but, you know, he still got the win. But he played phenomenal that game.
Yeah, and that third line has been playing really well. It's almost like this team is playing better without Marcus Kruger. But this third line of Ryan Hartman, Tanner Kara, and Richard Panik is playing really well. Really well.
I love what I've seen from Hartman. I really do. Like, you know, people are saying, hey, is he going to be like another Andrew Shaw? I mean, the way he's scoring, the way he's got this ability, like, I think Ryan Hartman could go a long way here. And, you know, when he plays with the right guys, I think it's a good future for him.
I think so too. I think the Blackhawks, it's weird because if you watch the Ice Hogs play, the Blackhawks, our sponsor, and the Blackhawks minor league franchise, AHL franchise, they haven't been playing that well this year, and
they're down the bottom of the standings. I've checked,
and but they have quite a bit of talent there, and I think part of it is the just lack of cohesiveness because of guys coming up and down from the roster, but
exactly,
and not goaltending depth. So you don't have good goaltending play, but so you.
And Matt Carruth is kind of struggling a little bit.
Yeah, he should be in the ECHL and playing in
with
Indianapolis.
Indy,
yeah. So you would get this sort of vibe that, oh, maybe the Blackhawks don't have a lot of talent in the minors, and I think they really do, and it's just who is going to take that step to be the next, you know, guy to play on this roster. Who's going to
never really judge a minor league team by prospects, or vice versa. I should say you can't judge a farm system necessarily by the rankings of the teams and like the records of the teams, because they could have a ton of great players, just not the right chemistry because of the fluctuation of the rosters.
Yeah, and you know, whenever the Blackhawks bring up a guy and he becomes a mainstay with the team, a lot of times is, if you follow closely, it's a guy who shouldn't have been, like, it wasn't their turn to come up. So when Trevor Van Riemsdyk came up, it wasn't his turn. Like, it should have been either like Adam Clendening's turn or Klaus Dahlbeck's turn. It was Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and they have their rhyme and reason for what they do. Brandon Saad wasn't supposed to be the next guy up. Andrew Shaw wasn't supposed to be the next guy up. So when they bring these guys up, it's it's who's going to be the one that takes advantage of this opportunity when they get it. Because right now, it's nobody's grabbed the bull by their horns. They've all had their ups and their downs. And so if any of these young Hawk players want to maintain their time on the ice with the big club, is they need to grab the bull by the horns and earn that right.
Right, exactly. It's funny, you look at how many prospects the Hawks have had come up or be traded for value since, say, their first cup run. A lot of them were involved in trades, and a lot of them were just kind of were call-ups to fill in a spot, and they ended up sticking around. It's not like baseball or something where it's like, oh, here comes the next big prospect. It's just kind of like, well, they're going to bring up Andrew Shaw. They need to fill in the place. They're going to bring up Andrew Shaw from the AHL. Look what he ends up doing. He sticks around for a long time. He makes some big plays in the postseason. It's little stuff like that with the Hawks. They make these little pieces fit, and that's part of why they've been so successful over the years, because of this depth that they've had both on the team and in the minors, and the minors feeding that to the team. So I always feel like there's always going to be these like big time prospects, but there's going to be these prospects that kind of just come up and make an impact right away. And you're seeing that with guys like Kepney or with Hartman, with Van Riemsdyk, and all that kind of stuff. It's really an important thing to have. And because these rosters are fluctuating so often, it's got to be tough for an AHL coach to put that all together, because it's going to be changing constantly. That's why it's so important to have this.
One of my favorite parts about going to the Ice Hogs games as media is the press conference with Ted Dent, their head coach, afterwards. It's not like the a professional press conference where you have like 20-30 outlets there, and it's usually the local newspaper, the committed Indian, and maybe me. And so there's three of us standing in front of him, and he makes Joe Quenneville look like a silly goose and a jokester. He's so serious. He always looks like he's gonna breathe fire on you.
Yeah, that's funny. I'd love to see this for myself sometime.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as the Blackhawks go, they still aren't getting net front presence. When they do, you get good things like the Anisimov game tying goal against Buffalo. Is you got him in front and good things happened. They're getting some nice shots, but they're not capitalizing on rebounds. And you've had some powder puffs come into town and play, like the Hurricanes and the Sabres, and you've got the Red Wings coming to town for the only time that they're going to play in Chicago all season long.
Which is so, I miss the days when we played them more than 2 times a year. The fact that we only play like our favorite rival team 2 times a year, it just sucks, because I love a good Hawks Red Wings game. I really do. And it was so appropriate for that like long-term rivalry to end in the Game 7 of the playoffs in overtime in 2013. But man, only seeing them twice a year, it's kind of a bummer.
Oh, it's a total bummer. But they're really struggling this year. But you've also got next week games against the Washington Capitals and the Minnesota Wild. So you've got some tough teams ready to play. And so the Blackhawks are going to need to correct some of these things, is, the penalty kill issues, the sloppy turnovers, getting guys in front of the goals for some, in front of the net for some greasy goals, because you might be able to get away with some of that stuff against bad teams, but those good teams it's gonna cost you in the standings. And the Blackhawks, not too recently had the best record in hockey, and right now it's they're all in the other conference, but there's several teams that have passed up the Blackhawks as far as their record goes.
Yeah, I think they have the fourth most points in the NHL right now. At least when I last looked at the standings this morning, obviously that could change tonight with different scores and whatnot. So, right now, I don't know if you're watching the game, but the Hawks scored a goal, but I think it's going to be coming back. So it'll still be 2-2, but I would love to pick up 2 points in this game because, like you said, you got the Red Wings. They're not nearly as good as what they once were, but they are still a rival team. They always bring their best out against the Hawks. We haven't won in Washington since 2008.
Yeah.
True story.
And we're going into the dog days of the season where you're going to have to start playing through injuries. You're going to have to start playing with fatigue. You're going to be playing multiple games in a week. There's going to be less rest. These are the dog days of the seasons, and you got to really fight through that, especially when you have a mostly veteran team, and just mustering up that will to get through the regular season.
Yeah, and we've seen it almost every year. It seems like late January and February is always that time of year when the Hawks always struggle. Back to even 2010. The dog days of the season, right after the midpoint, is right around that All-Star time. That's always when the Hawks like to go into their little slump. So you hope you can at least play respectable, not fantastic, but not awful, to at least, keep pace with everyone else. If you can do that, and then, you zoom off going into the playoffs, then you're fine.
Yeah, and there's 2 other Blackhawks points that I want to bring up. One was a fan question. The other was a media report about the Blackhawks. Do you have a preference of which one we do first?
Let's go with the fan question.
So we got a question with the way that Scott Darling has been playing as this season. Is it a consideration that the Blackhawks could trade Corey Crawford in the offseason for salary cap relief and go with Scott Darling? Your thoughts first.
I really don't see them doing that. I understand where you're coming from when it comes to salary cap, but I really think the Hawks are more comfortable still sticking with Corey Crawford. I feel like they don't want to give him up because they know what he's been able to do in a long-term basis, especially with the playoffs. We've seen Scott Darling play so well, but obviously Corey Crawford is the better of the two, as good as Darling has been. And there's also the question of what's Darling's future going to be like with the expansion draft. You ask stuff like that to yourself. So I really don't see it happening. And it also has to do with we really don't have much good goaltending depth in the farm system because you still need a backup. Lars Johansson doesn't have much experience. Matt Carruth is nowhere near NHL ready. So I think that also plays a factor in it. So right now I'm going to say the Hawks are not going to do that. But that's just kind of what I think.
Yeah, I think the same thing, maybe a little different reasons. First of all, Corey Crawford has a full no trade, no movement clause in his contract. So
that's also true.
If you were to get rid of him, he would have to okay it. And I can't see him wanting to go anywhere other than maybe Montreal because that's where he's from. But they don't need a goaltender. So he's not going to go
especially if it's a team that's not good. He's not going to want to go to a bad team.
Yeah, so I don't see him going anywhere. The other thing is, Scott Darling is, right now, I think people have a little bit of a last thing they saw bias, because as of this season, is statistically, Scott Darling is playing like one of the elite goalies. But if you look at last season, is statistically he was actually below average We saw some nice things from him, but statistically, he was a below average goalie. So I don't know where his actual true abilities lie. Was it last year a little bit of an anomaly, and this year is what he can actually do, or was this year an anomaly and last year was closer, or if he's somewhere in the middle? I don't know. And is that a question you really want to answer? If you could move Corey Crawford, and second of all, is you were right, spot on with the expansion draft. Is by rule, every organization has to make one of their goalies available for the expansion draft. So Scott Darling is going to be the one that's exposed, because you can't expose Corey Crawford. You have to expose him. He's also going to be a restricted free agent after the end of the season, so he's going to be due a raise. And he's stated publicly that he wants to play his whole career with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, to what degree is that a reality? Because he's making about $550,000 per year. A goalie of his caliber, probably in the open market, will get between $1 and $1.5 million per year. If it's the difference between like $6 to $7 million, is it like that? You could do that as a hometown discount, but from $500,000 to $1 million or $1.5 million, is that something you can afford as far as your future? The rest of what you're going to do with the rest of your life, is that something that you're willing to do to stay, and still live in Lamont? I don't know. I don't think so.
I think the hometown discount thing is kind of a term that's thrown out a little too much. I really think at the end of the day, people are going to want to make the money, regardless of hometown or not. So I really don't think that has as much of a factor. I could be wrong. People are different, but I don't really see it right now as being something I'd count on as being part of a factor.
Yeah, so I don't see the Blackhawks being able to keep him. I look for him to be probably a good candidate to go to Las Vegas, or if they don't select him, to move on somewhere else. I just don't see him not getting picked up. I think he's, as far as the second goalies, he's one of the top second goalies in the league, and there's a couple teams in this league he could probably start for today. But there's a lot of good goaltending in the NHL right now.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
It's supply and demand. If the demand's not there, then it's not like you can move him. So I don't expect him back with the Blackhawks, and Corey Crawford's not going anywhere. So I can appreciate outside the box thinking by our listener about ways to solve the financial crisis of the Blackhawks, but Corey Crawford is like something you can't do. He's there. Yeah. You're paying him that money, and he's a top 5 goalie. He's worth every cent.
But it's a question, at least kind of thinking about. There's never really a dumb question when it comes to that kind of thing, because salary cap can be so unforgiving, and that's what makes doing what the Blackhawks have done so hard.
Oh yeah,
because of the constraints it has.
Yeah, and absolutely no such thing as dumb questions, and it's worth thinking about, because if you're a casual fan or you're a recent fan, is seeing Scott Darling out there, you're like, well, this guy's pretty good too, especially after the game against Carolina, where he was played amazing. Statistically this year, he's playing at an elite goalie level, but
yes, he is.
You don't know if that's his if he can play that way consistently for a whole season when he's the guy.
Right.
He's shown that he can come in there and spot starts, or for a couple week span when Crawford's hurt, and do that. But can he do that for the long haul? And how confident are you in his ability to do that?
Right. You look at Corey Crawford, and he came full-time with Chicago 2010, 2011, because we lost Niemi, we lost UA after they won the Cup. We brought in Marty Turco. Marty Turco was way too old and way past his prime. So Corey Crawford came up, and that's when he started finally getting the consistent playing time. By 2012, he was full-time starter. By 2013, he was playing at an elite level and on his way to 2 more cups within the next few years. You know, it's kind of one of those things where it's hard for a goalie to just kind of jump in and make an immediate elite impact. Sometimes you kind of got to build it up for over a few years. Because you remember, Corey Crawford's been in the Blackhawks system for a long time, and he's been up and down a number of years. I mean, he played a few games in 2009, 2010, few games before that. I think he made his NHL debut in 2008, but really from when he was drafted to about 2010 is, you know, he spent more time in the AHL than the NHL. Finally made his way to the NHL, you know, started a number of games for a few years, then he became the full-time starter. So, you know, sometimes with that kind of thing, it takes a while to get in, to be part of an NHL starting core because, you know, AHL, NHL, you know, pretty big differences there. So, you know, we've seen Darling be a backup, only really playing starting time when Corey was hurt, whereas Corey worked his way into starting and got that experience, then became kind of the elite goalie you see today.
And the last point I wanted to make with the Blackhawks is I read recently a report that the Blackhawks were interested in Jerome Iginla, and it was originally phrased as a replacement for Marian Hossa, which everyone lost their mind because there's on no planet is in 2017 is Jerome Iginla a replacement for Marian Hossa. Jerome Iginla had put together a very nice career, but Marian Hossa is still playing great, and
he's younger.
Yes, but then it was kind of modified to where it was, Jerome Iginla as a depth for if somebody gets hurt for the playoffs.
Kind of like an Antoine Vermette type thing.
Yeah, except old.
Right, exactly.
I don't know what to make of that because I don't even know if they could fit him in financially because I was
thinking the same thing.
He's still making some decent scratch. The Blackhawks would have to trade somebody for him, so they have to give somebody up to get him. If it was one thing, if the Avalanche were like, you know what, we just want to get rid of his salary, give us like a super late draft pick for him, maybe.
Yeah.
But regardless, if you could fit him into the cap, which I don't know you can, is what does he provide to you? He's not going to be your fourth liner. You've got your third liner playing well. He's not going to break up that Anisimov, Kane, Panarin line, and you're not going to put him with Hossa and Taves. Where does he fit in? I mean, sure, in short bursts he can, provide like some nice shots there for you, but he doesn't have any wheels anymore. He's not a two-way player. It just doesn't make any sense to me on any level. And I really think, I'm not sure who the guy is. I mean, I saw his name, but I'm not familiar with his work. I don't know if he is just a guy that was just trying to create some buzz behind his name by making up a story or what, because I can't see any planet where the Blackhawks would do that even if they could.
Right. No, I saw that too. And, people on Twitter were talking about it, and I didn't really see the exact source, but I saw that it was reported that by so-and-so, or it was retweeted by so-and-so, that the Blackhawks were looking to replace Marian Hossa with Jerome Iginla. And my initial thought was, well, does that mean Hossa is going to be out for an extended period of time and they need someone to fill in, like Antoine Vermette filled in for Kane? And, like you said, Jerome Iginla, I mean, he had a very good career. He was one of the great scorers of this generation, but he's ancient now. He's not what he used to be. He's way past his prime. I forget he's still in the league these days. He's rotting with the Avalanche now. I mean, when he was a Flame for most of his career, you always are like, all right, Flames, I think Jerome Iginla. You forget he's still playing these days, and I think it probably was just a little buzz or maybe some sort of misinformation, but what I noticed about that report is it really didn't extend anywhere in terms of advances of the talks, and it was kind of forgotten about the next day almost, at least from what I saw. Maybe you saw it differently, but it was kind of talked about for a little bit, and then it was just kind of forgotten about. So it didn't seem like, for the time being, that it was really anything big or serious, but it was interesting.
Yeah, it was funny though, is because the person who originally tweeted it had the little symbol on their Twitter account that they're verified that who they are.
The
So
check
they must be like a real either media person or whatever.
Do you
But
remember the name of this person?
I'd have to look it up. I offhand I do not.
I can look it up right now on my phone to look at Joe McGinley talks.
Yeah, it must be some beat person for the Avalanche or something. But even like Mark Lazarus at some point was just like, nope. Like the guy who runs the Committed Indian was like going after him. Like anybody that covers the Blackhawks seriously, it was just like, not just casual fans were blasting it, but like legit people that cover the Blackhawks were just like, get out of here. There's no way you're making things up.
It sounds crazy, because it is crazy.
But I guess the last thing we could talk about is the sudden resurgence of Jimmy Butler these last couple games.
Yeah, kind of carrying the team on his back amidst all this Rondo garbage. I mean, look at what he did last night. The Bulls were down. We all know the Raptors are cursed against the Bulls, and here comes second half Jimmy Butler just cranking everything, firing all cylinders, and they eventually win in overtime.
Yeah, and the funny part about it is this is such a Bulls / Garpax type move, is that as soon as Jimmy takes that step from just being a great player in this league to being a superstar, is then they start talking about trading him. You're like, what are you doing? Like, this is the guy that you're trying to get. This is the guy. Is the 76ers have had top 3 drafts in the past 5 years, and they still can't get a guy of that caliber. So this is the guy that you need. You need another guy like this to compete in the NBA. But this is, if you're Garpax, suddenly this is the moment where you look up at the heavens and the clouds all moved out of the way, and this ray of sunshine shines down on you, and you go, this is it. This is what we have to do, is we have to trade everything to build around Jimmy. This is what we have to do. And instead, they're like, maybe we should just trade him.
Right.
For what? What are you going to get for Jimmy Butler? You're not going to get somebody else's superstar. It's not like you're going to swap superstars. And if you get, even say you get the number 1 overall pick, which you can't guarantee because it's the lottery system. But let's say you get the best odds of getting the number 1 pick in a trade. I don't even know if you're allowed to trade that. I don't know, but it's like, who is coming out of this draft that's going to be somebody that's going to help you out next year? It's not like there's a Kevin Durant in this draft. It's not like there's a Dwayne Wade or a LeBron James or a Kobe Bryant in this draft.
And even so, the way the Bulls like to play, they probably wouldn't even get a chance to get a player like that.
So seeing Jimmy take that step up and be a superstar and they beat some good teams. It's not like they beat Powder Puffs. They beat the Raptors. They beat the Cavaliers. Jimmy has just gone crazy, and we're seeing the things he can do now. Is we already knew that younger in his career, he could be a shutdown guy. If that's what he focused on, he could be a shutdown defender. Now he's shown that he can be a guy. And the funny part about it is, think about when Derek, before all the injuries, they said, who's going to be that secondary scorer with Derek? Who is it? And you have the whole debacle of injuries and then, public fighting and the trade of Derrick Rose. And now Jimmy Butler comes into his own. So you had the guy all along. But this is your guy. This is the guy that's going to create shots for you. He's going to be your scorer. He can do all these things. You need to build around him. Like, that's what you have to do now. You have to be able to go, all right, if we can get rid of Rondo, we get rid of Rondo. We say, Taj,
Please get rid of Rondo.
yeah, Taj, you've been great for us. Adios. You're getting traded. You hope that Denzel Valentine can become something. You hope you can get consistency from Nick Dermott. You get rid of Nico Mirotic for anything you can. You trade everything you can to get more picks. You hope you get that Sacramento pick finally. And you try to build around Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you got to do at this point. Jimmy Butler right now, he's playing, the way he's playing, you could argue top 10 player in the league right now. If you traded him away, you'd always be asking yourself in this situation, are you getting the true value of what Jimmy Butler is worth? And is it worth moving forward if you really don't have a plan moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you trade Jimmy Butler right now, you're saying we don't know what to do. We are waving the white flag and trying to just rebuild from scratch and blow this up. If you're really truly trying to build a winner, you go, we've got a guy. Let's add another guy, whether that be through the free agency or trying to build up draft picks. At the end of the season, you've got a guy like JJ Redick, who, a legitimate 3-point shooter, you've got a few role players. I don't think there's any superstars, except maybe, is the guy from the Clippers in free agency?
Chris Paul?
No, the guy from UCLA.
Blake Griffin.
Blake Griffin. I think he's a free agent as well.
I believe so.
So you've got guys who you could put as role pieces and try to build around Jimmy, along with draft picks, but you're going to have to really play this smart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with the way I see this over and over. The position the Bulls are in right now is the worst. Being mediocre, middle of the road, average is the worst. It makes everything so much more difficult.
Yeah, I just looked at the free agency list. Steph Curry's a free agent.
Yeah, he's coming to Chicago, like Melo, like LeBron. Yeah.
You know what though, is if you're the Bulls and you clean house with your GM and you show that you are building around Jimmy and trying to add another superstar, you've got the money. You've got the money if you're the Bulls. You could. The thing is Steph Curry is trying to get paid. If you could throw the money at him.
Oh yeah, big time money.
And it's not going to be a situation where it's a flop. You've got Jimmy with him. That's a possibility. Kevin Durant is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Blake Griffin is a free agent. Chris Paul is a free agent. Kyle Lowry is a free agent. Paul Millsap is a free agent. Gordon Hayward is a free agent. And the ultimate free agent is a free agent, LeBron. Wait, he's not going nowhere, but just saying.
No, he's not. But technically, yes, you are right.
So all the negativity we've been throwing at the Bulls is the way that Jimmy has stepped up in light of the Rondo benching, and all of the face of negativity and badness of the Bulls is he came out after that first game where he was on fire and said, listen, now we can try to string some W's together. I'm sorry, he said dubs. String some dubs together. Is he actually is following through and playing like this. And, if he can keep playing like this and come playoffs when you're going to get, Dwayne Wade playing like Dwayne Wade in those short bursts, but still playing like a Dwayne Wade, is maybe you do make the playoffs. Maybe you do shock somebody in that first round. You're not winning any titles, but I mean, who knows? Anything's possible in those first couple rounds. But still, at least Jimmy playing like this is a life preserver being thrown to a drowning organization.
Right. It's like I said, everything is made so much more complicated because of the position the Bulls are in. Now, with Jimmy Butler, if you're looking at Jimmy Butler and you're saying, we want to build around this guy, we want him to be the centerpiece of what we're trying to do, then that's probably what a lot of people would like to see, because Jimmy Butler is really good, and you don't want to just trade him away on a whim, just to trade him away in attempts to change the direction of the organization without having an actual plan. Because knowing Garpax, it would probably be on a whim just to go in another direction without actually having a plan. So you say to yourself, okay, we want to build around Jimmy. How are we going to do that? Are we going to draft? Are we going to tank? What are we going to do? Are we going to try to go after these superstars with the paychecks again? We know that hasn't worked in the past, but maybe you want to try to get there's so many different tangents. There's so many different places you can go to, but they're all not easy. That's the thing. They are all not easy. It's not like we know we're going to have a number one lottery pick. It's so difficult to depend on one direction when the direction you're in right now, A, doesn't exist, and B, is in a worst possible situation. If the Bulls were bad and they had, the bigger chances of a lottery or at least a top pick, then maybe it'd be a little easier. But right now, being in the middle, that's not the case, and it's not like they have a chance to compete for a championship. But Jimmy Butler is, I think, if the Bulls are truly going to rebuild, Jimmy Butler could really be your potential guy to build around, because the way he's playing, you don't want to get rid of that. It's very, you're not trading for prospects like a White Sox trading for Chris Sale. You're doing something much. Basketball doesn't work that way. So, right now it's really hard for me to see what the Bulls are going to do. It really, really is.
And maybe Jimmy is the guy who's going to actually try to recruit free agents, unlike Derrick Rose, who just like, nah, dog, I'm not doing that.
I think Jimmy Butler, let's just say, I trust Jimmy Butler recruiting a lot more than I would Derrick Rose.
Agreed.
Plain and simple.
So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to this show, but I think we had a really good show. We vented a lot of stuff about the Bears. I would like to add the Hawks won 5-2. Hartman got a very unusual hat trick. It was kept off with an empty netter. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's great. And I want to quickly say congratulations to Chris Bryant, our MVP, on getting married.
Oh yeah, I mean that guy's got it made. He's rich. He's a World Series champion. He's the MVP. He just got married. He's got it all right now.
Yeah, this is top of the world for him. So
you can't get much higher.
Well,
and he's only 25.
I know he's still young. So that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure you check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, however you listen to podcasts. Hit subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you want to vent on the show, please get in touch, and we will do our best to make sure that happens. And thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.